But you're the one who's saying lockdowns don't work. I mean, the first thing one would say is tell that to the Chinese, tell that to the North Koreans.
And your face there just speaks 1,000 words. What did you think when you heard him say that?
I was just completely mesmerised. I mean, where was he going with some of this stuff? I mean, yeah, that's literally the first time ever that I've been asked or sort of, in a way, aligned with North Korea. I mean, it was almost as though he was just completely losing the plot, dear Adam. At the end of the day, what's really interesting about this is, we've said that we're changing the name of the party because as we look forward, actually, there's so much in the way that our country is governed and run where things need reform.
Hello and welcome to Reasons UK with me, Darren Grimes. If you enjoyed today's show, please do hit that little subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss out on any future content. We're also halfway to our fundraising target on GoFundMe, link in the description. So if you're in a position to support us, please do help keep Reason free. Anyway, that's enough housekeeping. Let's discuss today's guest. He's Richard Tice, a former MEP and chairman of the Brexit Party. Now, an application has been made to the Electoral Commission, my good friends, to change the Brexit Party's name to Reform UK. I want to know, what will this transformed political movement look like? Let's find out right now. Hello, Richard. How are you doing?
Hi there, Darren. I'm great. Nice to be with you. Thanks for having me on. It's it's an extraordinary time. Here we go again, it feels like.
I know. You've had quite the morning.
Well, yes. It's inevitable, and we've had a busy media run. We've been literally inundated with support, goodwill messages, and the joy of democracy is, of course, there are people who are of a different persuasion, who have a different political view, and that's fine. And we get the usual trolling and abuse, and sometimes that comes from people we haven't heard of, and sometimes it comes from the mainstream media, as I've just experienced with Sky TV.
Well, exactly. Let's talk about that. Before we get into the meat of the new venture, I have to ask you about this clip from Adam Bolton, who basically says, Richard, that you cannot argue that lockdowns don't work when the likes of North Korea, let's not forget, a police state, has made a success of them. Let's just play the clip and you can respond to it afterwards.
But you're the one who's saying lockdowns don't work. I mean, the first thing one would say is tell that to the Chinese, tell that to the North Koreans, tell that to the Singaporeans, all of whom have that to the Chinese, tell that to the North Koreans, tell that to the Singaporeans, all of whom have used it.
And your face there just speaks 1,000 words. What did you think when you heard him say that?
I was just completely mesmerised. I mean, where was he going with some of this stuff? I mean, that's literally the first time ever that I've been asked or sort of, in a way, aligned with North Korea. I mean, it was almost as though he was just completely losing the plot, dear Adam. At the end of the day, what's really interesting about this is, we've said that we're changing the name of the party because as we look forward, actually, there's so much in the way that our country is governed and run where things need reform, and we can do so much better. And so that's, our party's name does what it says on the tin. And there'll be a time to get into all of those areas. But we've got, in the same way that Brexit was an urgent crisis that, we basically launched to deal with, and we successfully dealt with that. COVID is the current crisis of a whole generation. It's actually a much, much bigger issue, to be honest, than Brexit. Sadly, I think it's going to end up dividing the country as big or greater than Brexit. And we have to have a grown-up national debate at looking at the other way. And we're very clear there is another way. There's a better way. It's called the Great Barrington Way. It's been put forward by some of the finest experts and epidemiologists from around the world, from Oxford, from Harvard, from Stanford, led by the likes of Sunetra Gupta. And they've put forward a very credible solution, which is where you do a really much better job of focusing protection around the vulnerable the elderly that want shielding, and there's many actually who don't want shielding. They want to get on with their lives, but focus the protection about those who need it, so that the rest of us, with sensible, common sense hygiene measures, which we all know about, and by and large most people are using, we then get on with the rest of our lives. Because what's not happening in this debate is that the context of the reality of the numbers is not being put out there very deliberately by a government that is trying to completely manipulate the British population in a very authoritarian way. And when I put the context to people, and I'll put it to you now, most people have no idea, and every death is a tragedy for family, for friends, for loved ones. We all know that, and we must keep saying it because it is, it is so important. But sadly, 1,600 people die every single day of every month, every year here in the UK. And that is just a fact of life. And when you then look at the number of daily deaths with COVID, and let's remember the word with as opposed to of, actually it is a small percentage of that. And you then have to consider a couple of things. The average COVID-related death is aged 82.
Yeah. And what's life expectancy?
81 and a half. So that is important to understand that context. And of course, there are lots of incredibly healthy 82-year-olds that are frankly are pushing on towards 100, which is to be celebrated. But it's important to understand that context. The other point is, if you catch the virus, you have over a 99.7% chance of surviving it. Pretty good odds.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're fit and healthy. And there is some extraordinary data coming out, and we keep learning about this virus, and we must all accept that. I can tell you, for example, currently, that about 80% of people in ICU are either overweight or obese. So we learn from this stuff, which makes it interesting when the government's shutting gyms, when actually, we need to be encouraging. And the Prime Minister himself has talked about, him being overweight. So the context of these numbers is really important. If you then look at, okay, so how many people are currently dying? People think that this COVID crisis currently in the last few weeks is really bad. Well, hang on, folks. Just look at how many people are dying every week. It's not above the normal 5-year average. You would expect deaths to increase, which they always do, at this time of the year as you go into winter. So the average weekly deaths is within a couple of percent of the 5-year average. What's happening is that the number of people who are dying, sadly, either of flu or pneumonia as the primary cause of death, that number is well below the 5-year average. And it's pretty obvious why. Because instead, what's being put as the main cause on their death certificate is COVID. So these are people who would, in the normal course of events, sadly, pass for flu or pneumonia. And actually what's happening is that they're dying and then probably have COVID. So the overall context is there is not a huge excess of mortality, of deaths. We've also done the calculations. 2020, we believe, will be an average year for total deaths, total number of deaths through until the end of the year, including all the COVID-related deaths. It will be an average year over the last 30 years. When you adjust for population, which again is important to set out the context, 2020, we've done the numbers, will be bang on the average. It's not going to be an exceptional year. So that context is really, really important.
I think you're right.
And no one's really put that message out there.
Personally, Richard, I think you'd have to be a fool not to take you guys seriously. You know, the Brexit Party famously went from absolutely nothing in April 2019 to winning the European elections a month later. And at a time when small businesses are being propelled into bankruptcy and misery, this could be as seismic as the exchange rate mechanism catastrophe was for John Major on Black Wednesday, when viable businesses, which would otherwise be prospering right now, are propelled into financial squalor.
Even today, we've had over 1,000 people ask to stand in elections. So, that's pretty strong. And I think we are, there's no question that we understand small businesses. We understand how many people have been literally clinging on by their fingertips to their business, whether it's a restaurant or whatever, a bar. And now, for many of them, sadly, they're literally having their fingernails ripped out of their fingers, and they're going to have to let the business go. And along with that, huge numbers of jobs and all the mental health issues, suicides are going through the roof. So yes, people want an alternative to vote for. The mainstream political class should be under no illusion. We know how to do this stuff in terms of campaigning, in terms of setting things up, and we plan to stand in the Scottish, the Welsh, the London elections. We plan to stand in local elections up and down the country, police and crime commissioners. We want to give people a real, serious, credible alternative, and we'll be coming out with a very credible alternative economic recovery plan, which will be based around going for growth, because you can't tax your way out of the economic crisis we're heading towards. The only way we can do it is by growing with the foot flat on the accelerator. And to do that, actually, we have to, I always believe the glass is half full, it's not half empty. And this is a moment beyond Brexit where we literally have to think British, we have to make British, and we have to buy British in the most patriotic way. And, I admire the French for their wonderful patriotic consumerism. They buy their own stuff, whether it's wine, cheese, cars, yogurt. We need to have the confidence, the passion, and the enthusiasm to do exactly that. Look, it's such a difficult time. But if we spread that message of hope, that message of belief, that there's light at the end of the tunnel, and that actually it's a way out as opposed to the oncoming train, then I think people may well be tempted to vote for us in very, very large numbers. And I don't think he'll be there very long at this rate.
I mean, I never thought I'd be sat here, Richard, to be honest with you, less than a year on from the general election where the government secured an 80-seat majority, thinking, well, this is all going to the dogs, isn't it? But listen, as a supporter of the rule of law and defending our police, Victoria Derbyshire of the BBC recently got into hot water for saying that actually, she would basically be sensible when it comes to the rule of six and break it if needs be to spend Christmas with her family. I wonder what your sort of message on these rules are, because there are a lot of Tories and those on the right who feel very conflicted about breaking rules and the rule of law, but also about actually spending Christmas with their family. What a horrible thing. My grandmother's 86, Richard, and the idea of not spending Christmas with her and leaving her on her own is inhuman. It beggars belief.
It does beg a belief. And we as a nation, we get into terrible, terrible difficulties, the likes of which we've never experienced. If we even have to ask this question, that what you can do at Christmas or, with your family and friends and loved ones is dictated to by an authoritarian government. We touched on North Korea earlier. That's the sort of thing you expect from North Korea. And I think the government will get into even greater trouble than it's currently in, unless actually it starts to apply some common sense. Because the truth is that governments, they govern with the consent of the people. And if they put forward daft, nonsensical rules that everybody knows makes no sense whatsoever, they should not be surprised if people would decide, do you know what, actually, we're going to make our own risk-based judgments and assessments. And look, those of us in positions of leadership, with a public profile, of course, we have to accept that, we have to say, we abide by the rule of law. But for heaven's sake, governments, don't be surprised if millions of people decide they're going to make their own judgments if those laws lack any form of credibility, any form of common sense, any form of rational approval. So, we get into a difficult place, and we should not be asking our police to be knocking on doors on Christmas morning to check how many people are in the house, how many place settings are laid at the table, because that will end up in a really, really bad place. That's not fair on the police. It's not fair on any citizens, and that requires sensible leadership with this. And you look at, so what's the alternative? Well, the alternative is very simple, Darren. The alternative is to say, well, what are they doing in countries that seem to be succeeding at this? And the most obvious example is Sweden. And they're adopting essentially what is recommended by the experts who've promoted the Great Barrington way of dealing with this, in our view, the better way. And that is where you apply common sense measures. We know what we've got to do in order to reduce the rate of transmission. And good government, it's a bit like with free markets, good governments should trust the people on these issues. Yes, fine, educate us. Tell us what they think works and doesn't work from a transmission basis. But then what they do in Sweden, they actually trust the people to apply common sense in a rational way. And that way you build confidence in the people, you build confidence in leadership. And I think if you just look at Sweden today, they've clearly built up over the summer significant immunity to this virus because they have been circulating. I think what they've been doing is actually using young people who catch the virus, even though they don't know it, they've had no symptoms whatsoever. They actually end up acting as shields, almost like soldiers and warriors against this virus. And that builds up a level of immunity that reduces the rate of transmission, that reduces infection and reinfection. So that is the way forward. Do you want back a success story? Sweden currently has got less than 5 deaths a day, give or take 1,000 cases a day. It's got a population of 10 million people. So that's just under a sixth of our population. And I think we should learn from them rather than try and be jealous of them and diss them and say, well, they're different for whatever reason, this and that. No. Focus on the success stories and let's learn from it and have that courage to admit our mistakes. And at the moment, I fear this is a government that's dug itself into a hole, and rather than provide a ladder by admitting its mistakes and to dig us out of this hole, no, it's put the JCB in and it's excavating much, much deeper into the hole.
It's if we think about a conversation I had last week with Lawrence Fox. Now, he was talking about how his party is going to protect the UK's, or seek to protect the UK's cultural heritage from those who simply do not wish us well, and stop the government and the opposition, and actually the media, from being able to pander relentlessly to those who simply do not wish our nation well, tearing down statues, attacks on our cultural identity, attacks on our heritage, our inheritance, which very much needs to be protected. I wonder, are you going to seek to do a similar thing, sort of try and attack the woke nonsense that we see at the moment? And do you think you'll have a real fight on your hands against Lawrence's party? Are you doing similar things, do you think?
Look, Lawrence is doing a great job, and it's fantastic that he took on that key focus and in a sense sort of specialise in it. In the same way, we initially, when we launched, we focused on one issue, Brexit, and I think what Lawrence is doing at the moment is admirably having to do what he's doing, and there's lots of us who feel very similar about this. I know you do, we do, but Lawrence is banging that drum. That's great. We're going to be very focused initially on the approach to COVID, and then as we come towards elections, who knows? They're some months away. I'm going to say it already. I'm beginning to hear little whisperings that the Tories might be quite glad if they found a way to postpone next May's elections. We would clearly fight that very, very hard. And I don't know what Lawrence's plans are in terms of where he may or may not want to stand candidates, but I'm quite sure all of us who believe in democracy would say, no, 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 we understand you deferred them once, but next May's elections, by hook or by crook, that absolutely must happen, even if it was to be all postal votes. And I've got some serious criticisms about the postal vote process, but better to have some democracy than no democracy.
I am personally delighted that you guys have decided to do this for the simple fact, Richard, that there is no opposition to these things. You did the media this morning, Sky News, one of our leading broadcasters, and he talks about how we actually could have achieved what North Korea has achieved. Are you kidding me? This is the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. You can't possibly compare us to the likes of North Korea. We would never accept such swinging infringements on our civil liberties in the same way that they do. And in the same way that Keir Starmer just seems to be sort of cheering the government on. There's hardly any semblance of opposition whatsoever. So, I doubt I'm alone, and I might be in that 23%. I don't know if you saw that poll, that 23% of those that are opposed to lockdown. That might not be a majority, but listen, we deserve a voice as well. So thank you for doing it.
Well, look, absolutely. I actually don't. I think that the YouGov has now become the propaganda arm of the government, because I just don't recognise, when I talk to real people on real streets, in real shops, real bars and cafes, or in real taxis, that is not the story I'm hearing at all. I think there's a silent majority. And do you know what? Maybe it's a bit like Brexit. Maybe it's a bit like in America with Donald Trump. People almost feel it's politically incorrect to say what they really mean. So they tell the pollster what they think the pollster wants to hear. And so we're going to give a voice to what I believe is the silent majority that think the government have got this terribly badly wrong in respect of the approach to Corona, and that we put a positive, credible, alternative solution backed up by amazing scientists and experts from around the world with much greater expertise than the constituents currently on the government's SAGE group. And that actually is and that we provide the political platform for people to be able to say, no, there is another way, and I'm going to vote that other way.
Mm-hmm. Richard, to end, I wonder, can you sum up for me, for those in despair, for those feeling utterly hopeless and powerless? That could be from students that are barricaded into their halls of residence, or older people like my grandmother. I went back home for a funeral during lockdown, and my family member said, you can't go near your grandmother. And my grandmother said, you are not leaving this house until I give you a hug. And it's just simple, as simple as that, right? And you just sort of think we are losing our common decency. That's what I think we're losing. And actually we're denying people of their agency to make their own sensible, common sense choices. So what would your message be to those people who feel utterly hopeless and powerless? Will your party be their voice?
Darren, I say to everybody, we will absolutely be the voice of hope, the voice of reason, the voice of optimism. There's so much where this great nation of ours that we all believe in, and we all want to work hard and to strive to improve and do well, but also to battle for our country. There is hope out there. We're going to provide a political platform. We're going to have the courage to tell it as it is. In terms of the areas of our great country where things need improving, in many areas of life. But first and foremost, the urgent task in hand, we're going to have the courage to take on this government, to take on the Labour Party on the approach to COVID. There are millions who support our approach to it. And so I say to people, come with us on this journey, share our courage, sign up, help us if you can with a donation, because ultimately, we can make a difference. We can shape and influence debate. We've done it before. We've got a great track record. We're focused on the mission, and with everybody's support and enthusiasm, we can definitely change the course of the way that COVID is dealt with, and then we focus on the other issues that need reform, and that's what we stand for. You know what? It does what it says on the tin. Like the Brexit Party, focused on Brexit, Reform UK. It's the same party renamed. We're going to focus and do what it says on the tin. We're going to reform the approach to COVID, and then we're going to work to reform other areas of public life.
Well, thank you, Richard. Where can people actually find out more about the project?
So currently, if you go to our website, which is still thebrexitparty.org, when we get formal approval from our beloved friends at the Electoral Commission, which will no doubt take weeks rather than days, then everything will be able to be confirmed. But at the moment, we've sort of got draft logo and things. But if they go to the website, then they can sign up. If people want to put their names forwards for candidates, for local elections, whatever, that would be wonderful too. We need great people, enthusiastic people, energetic people who want to make a difference, want to help shape and influence, in their communities. This is a time really actually stand up and be counted, and come and help us. We need all the help that this country deserves.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Richard.
Great pleasure.
Now, I'm sure after that you'll be wanting to hit that little subscribe button and the notification bell. And as I say, we're over halfway to our fundraising target. The link's in the description. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time.